What if you suddenly lost everything and had no one by your side? The air inside Tesla's Fremont facility buzzed with electric anticipation, the kind that gripped your lungs and made every breath feel like the pause before a storm. Cameras lined the perimeter of the stage, red lights blinking like they too were holding their breath. Then, the heavy steel curtain lifted with a metallic groan, revealing something that looked more like a vision than a vehicle, a sleek, silver shape, rounded like a whisper and silent like an answer to a question the world hadn't known how to ask. The Tesla Robovan. Elon Musk stepped into the light, hands folded, a rare flicker of genuine excitement brushing his expression. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice low but sharp like a switchblade, "this isn't just another car. It's the beginning of the end, for traffic, for pollution, for the way we think about people moving." People gasped, some even laughed out loud, not in mockery, but in sheer disbelief. And behind that unveil, behind that moment destined to trend, to flash across timelines and dominate headlines, there was someone watching silently from the edge of the crowd. Her name was Sarah Davis. She wasn't famous. She wasn't Elon. She didn't have a billion-dollar brand or an army of followers. But that van. That machine everyone was now obsessing over like it had descended from space. She had built it. She had poured her life into it, night after night, code after code, doubt after doubt. And no one in that room knew her name. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Sarah stood still, the noise of the moment crashing over her like a storm tide. It was happening, and yet it didn't feel real. Just weeks ago, she had been huddled over a half-working CAD model at 3 a.m., her hands trembling from too much caffeine and not enough faith. She had nearly quit a dozen times. She had almost walked away after the first prototype collapsed under the simulated stress test. And now here she was, in the crowd, invisible and burning inside. Elon's voice sliced through the clamor. "We built this with one goal, to reimagine public transport, family travel, and urban delivery. We call it the Robovan. But it's more than a van. It's freedom." The media fed on it like piranhas. Cameras snapped. Commentators frothed over its all-electric drive, level 5 autonomy, ergonomic seats designed to shift with your spine. But Sarah's eyes weren't on the van anymore. They were fixed on the screen above, showing a 3D animation of the Robovan moving gracefully through simulated city streets. It turned corners with inhuman ease, weaved through impossible traffic with zen-like flow, and stopped, without jerking, at every red light like it was obeying not a program, but an intuition. She had coded that. Every behavior. Every nuance. Even the way it curved slightly to avoid puddles. That had been her idea. "People think design is about what looks good," Sarah whispered to herself, barely audible, but real design cares. No one heard her. No one was supposed to. She wasn't on stage. She wasn't giving the TED Talk. She was just the engineer. The one who built the thing everyone else would sell. And still, the moment curled around her, wrapping itself into her bones. Maybe it didn't matter that her name wasn't trending. Maybe it didn't matter that Elon would take the credit. Maybe what mattered was that it worked. That it was real. The crowd erupted into applause, and Elon grinned, the kind of grin that made people believe the future had already arrived and had a reservation in their driveway. "Deliveries start next spring," he announced, and the roar that followed could have powered the entire grid if someone had harnessed it. As people surged forward for photos, Sarah turned away. She had seen enough. She knew what the Robovan could do. The world would learn. But the crowd didn't notice the woman in jeans and a Tesla crew hoodie slip out the side door into the chilled night air. They didn't see the way her hand shook slightly as she pulled out her phone. They didn't know she was calling her mother, who wouldn't answer. Again. "Hey Mom," Sarah said to the voicemail after the beep. "You were right. I didn't need to be famous. I just needed it to work. It worked. She paused. I wish you could have seen it. She hung up, leaned against the concrete wall of the building, and looked up. The stars in the California sky seemed just a little brighter tonight, or maybe she just had less darkness in her chest. Either way, it felt like a beginning. Not a finish line, but a start. And yet, in the back of her mind, the whisper that had always haunted her came back like a ghost looking for rent. What happens when they ask for more? Sarah rubbed her temple. This was only the launch. The real test hadn't started yet. The world didn't just want innovation, it demanded perfection. And perfection was a myth. Inside the building, Elon was now joking with a reporter about how the Robovan could replace soccer moms and UPS trucks in one fell swoop. The laughter echoed like a victory lap. But Sarah wasn't smiling. Her mind had already moved ahead, thinking about the feedback loops, the autonomous decision matrices, the ethical fail-safes they hadn't fully tested yet. There was still so much that could go wrong. And the world wouldn't blame Elon when it did. They'd blame the system. The tech. The nameless people behind it. People like her. She inhaled deeply, the night air sharp with the scent of ozone and battery coolant. She closed her eyes, just for a second, and let the noise of the reveal party fade into background static. What had started as a whisper in her college dorm, the idea that vehicles could be more humane, had turned into something tangible. Not perfect. But real. She turned and walked slowly toward her car. Not the Robovan. Just her beat-up Honda she refused to trade in, out of some strange loyalty or nostalgia or both. As she drove home, headlights carving golden tunnels through the freeway dark, she replayed the unveil in her mind like a scene from a movie she wasn't sure she believed was hers. The look on Elon's face. The applause. The glowing press. And underneath all of it, the quiet certainty that this was just the start of something bigger than any of them. She didn't know then that the next few weeks would stretch her beyond anything she thought she could endure. That a storm was coming, not of weather, but of public opinion, of internal politics, of systems pushed beyond their limits. But tonight, none of that had arrived yet. Tonight, she had done it. She had built the future. And maybe, just maybe, she had found the first thread of her own. Sarah Davis wasn't supposed to end up at Tesla. At least, not according to the script everyone else seemed to think she was following. Born and raised in a blue-collar suburb just outside Detroit, she grew up with oil under her fingernails and grease-stained textbooks in her backpack. Her father, Jim Davis, ran a modest auto repair shop, a crumbling garage on Woodward Avenue that never made much money but always ran honest. That shop was her childhood playground, the scent of rubber and steel her lullaby, the hum of engines her soundtrack. While other girls were playing house, she was rebuilding carburetors and asking questions about gear ratios. She remembered her father's hands, cracked, calloused, permanently smudged with grime, and the way he looked at cars like they were old friends who spoke a language only he could hear. He wasn't an engineer, not by any formal definition, but he had the instinct for machines. He could hear an engine 2 blocks away and tell you if it needed a new belt or a valve cleaning. Sarah idolized that. Not the shop, not the work, but the connection. The idea that a machine could tell you something, if you just listened right. She carried that with her into high school, where she outpaced the boys in every math and physics class and won the state science fair with a project about electric torque curves. Teachers were baffled. Peers were resentful. Her guidance counselor, a well-meaning woman who still called Detroit, Motor City, with a kind of mournful reverence, told her she had two options: go into automotive engineering or waste her talent. Sarah didn't like boxes. So she applied to MIT. Got in. Didn't tell anyone until the acceptance letter arrived, and even then, her father had simply nodded and said, "You'll fix better things than I ever did, kid." That was the only blessing she needed. Boston was a different universe. At MIT, no one cared where you came from as long as your code compiled and your logic held. Sarah thrived in that clarity. But while others in her cohort gravitated toward rocket science and bioengineering, she stayed loyal to mobility. She wasn't trying to build escape pods. She was trying to reimagine the roads we already had. Her senior thesis, a neural network-powered adaptive suspension system that could learn driving preferences, got her noticed by a startup in Palo Alto, which led her west. Tesla didn't happen right away. There were years in obscurity. Years of bouncing between contracts, small roles, long hours, low pay. And always, the whisper of doubt. She was good. But was she necessary? Then came the winter of 2022. A friend of a friend mentioned Tesla was assembling a special division, stealth mode, invite only. Rumors swirled, something autonomous, something big. Sarah submitted her resume. Never heard back. 3 months later, she got a text. Not an email. Not a call. Just a text that said, interview. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. Do not be late. It came from a Bay Area number she didn't recognize. She showed up in a rain-soaked hoodie and old sneakers, expecting a quick rejection. Instead, she was ushered into a glass room where a man named Ravi, who would later become her team lead, handed her a coffee and said, "We're building something that will either change the world or get us all fired. Want in?" She said yes before knowing what the project was. She just knew it was time. Time to stop waiting for someone to tap her on the shoulder and declare her worthy. Time to build something that didn't just move, it mattered. The first months were chaos. Nobody had titles. Everyone had access to everything. Elon himself was supposedly reviewing code in the middle of the night, sending Slack messages with no subject lines and cryptic directives like, "make it breathe," or "no lag." Ever. There were no rules. Only deadlines. Sarah found herself thrown into the deep end, tasked with designing the Robovan's emotional intelligence interface. Not just how it drove, but how it felt. How it responded to human uncertainty. If someone hesitated to board, would it pause gently or wait impatiently? If a child ran behind it, would it brake or predict and redirect? She wasn't writing programs. She was writing instincts. And it broke her. At least once a week she ended up crying in the Tesla bathroom, staring at herself in the mirror, wondering if she was a fraud. But then she'd go back to her desk and lose herself in the code until the sun came up. And every time she saw the simulation get a little smoother, a little kinder, she felt a piece of herself come back together. Then there was James. He was older, mid-40s maybe, with an army buzz cut and a stare that could slice through drywall. He didn't like Sarah at first. Said she was too idealistic. Said empathy didn't belong in mechanical systems. But then one night, around 2 a.m., they were the only two left in the lab, arguing about how the Robovan should respond when a pedestrian jaywalked in low visibility. She said it should slow and display a warning on the dash for all passengers. He said it should honk and proceed, to avoid causing confusion. They argued for an hour. At the end, he sighed and said, "You might be right." That was the closest thing to an apology she ever got from James. But after that, something shifted. He started inviting her to meetings. Deferring to her on interface decisions. Even told Ravi once, "Sarah's got the pulse of this thing. Let her lead it." It was the first time she'd felt seen in years. Maya, on the other hand, had seen her all along. They'd met in Boston, roommates during sophomore year, and never drifted. Even when Sarah moved west, Maya stayed connected, FaceTiming during breakdowns, flying out for birthdays, sending snack care packages when deadlines got brutal. Maya wasn't an engineer. She was a therapist. But somehow, she understood Sarah better than most coders ever could. "Machines don't need to feel," Maya once said, "but the people who build them do. That's your edge, Sar. Don't lose it." Sarah clung to that during the hard weeks. The silent crashes. The bug in the perception algorithm that made the prototype fail during a demo in front of investors. The day Ravi told them half their data had been corrupted due to a server update. Through all of it, Sarah kept building. Not just code, but resilience. She was different now. Tougher. Smarter. But still her. Still the girl who believed machines could care. By the time the prototype was ready, Sarah had poured over 1,800 hours into the Robovan. She knew every line of code like a lyric. She could sketch the wiring diagram from memory. And when it finally rolled out for internal testing, she rode in the first seat, heart pounding, fingers clenched, eyes wide. It didn't jerk. It didn't stutter. It moved like something alive. She cried. Not big, ugly sobs, just a single tear that rolled down her cheek, hot and quiet. She didn't say anything. No one did. They didn't have to. They all felt it. This wasn't just a car. It was a leap. A promise. The beginning of something better. She called her dad that night. Told him what they'd done. Told him about the first ride. He didn't say much. Just breathed heavy on the other end. Then he said, "I always knew you'd build something I couldn't fix." That was his version of, "I'm proud of you." She hung up and sat in silence, staring at the lab lights flickering off the polished shell of the Robovan. And for the first time in a long time, she let herself believe she wasn't chasing a fantasy. She was living it. She just didn't know yet how hard it would be to hold on to. It started with a ping. Just a tiny notification in the company Slack thread marked priority, red. The kind of thing you didn't ignore unless you wanted to be vaporized in the next team stand-up. Sarah clicked on it without hesitation, already half dreading what she'd see. It was a sensor report. 2 anomalies. One involving the rear object detection module, and the other, more serious, in the primary decision logic loop. The Robovan had rolled through a simulated 4-way stop without yielding to a digital pedestrian. That alone wouldn't have been a disaster. Simulations glitched all the time. What made Sarah's stomach clench was the follow-up message from Ravi, "We need eyes on this today." Elon saw the logs. Not happy. That was it. No emojis. No sugar. Just Elon saw the logs. And when Elon saw the logs, the whole building felt it. Sarah didn't need caffeine that morning. Her adrenaline was enough. She pulled up the logs, buried herself in the decision trees, and immediately saw the problem. A conditional flag for ambiguous pedestrian movement wasn't firing when weather modifiers were active. Which meant if a virtual person moved strangely during rain or fog conditions, the system defaulted to assume static rather than assume movement. It was an oversight. A small one, technically. But small oversights in autonomous vehicles were landmines. She patched it in 43 minutes flat. Committed the fix. Notified QA. But by then, the Slack channel had lit up with speculation, worry, and the creeping shadow of corporate panic. And worse, someone from external PR had joined the thread. That never happened unless things were about to go public. The Robovan had been internally tested for months, but its performance data was confidential. And yet, leaks happened. People talked. Rivals watched. The thought of one bug turning into a headline made Sarah's skin itch. That afternoon, a tense meeting was called. Sarah sat across from James, Ravi, and a VP from legal who had never stepped foot in the lab before today. Her name was Carly, and she had perfect posture and a voice like cold iron. "We've had 2 minor sensor irregularities in the past 10 days, Carly said, sliding a printed report across the table. Normally, this would stay in-house. But because Elon tweeted the phrase, flawless autonomy, yesterday in reference to the Robovan, we're now held to an impossible standard. Sarah didn't like the word, impossible. She liked numbers. Data. Possibilities. The bug was in the conditional flags, she said, evenly. It's patched. Live. Passed sandbox testing within 2 hours. But perception is reality, Carly replied. If it gets out, it's not going to matter that we fixed it. The story will be, Tesla's Robovan fails to detect pedestrian. And you know what happens then. James groaned and rubbed his temples. Ravi just stared at the ceiling. Sarah clenched her jaw. It wasn't just the pressure. It was the injustice of it all. Engineers like her broke themselves to make these systems better, safer, and yet the public only saw the failures. The one bug. The one glitch. Never the 10,000 things that had gone right. Carly pushed forward. We're not pulling the launch, she said. But we need to tighten review on all modules. Every subsystem goes through a second pass. If you coded it, someone else signs off. That stung. It wasn't a punishment, but it felt like one. Like someone didn't trust her work. James must have sensed her frustration. After the meeting, he found her in the stairwell, sitting on the third step, eyes closed, hands in her hoodie pockets. Don't take it personally, he said, leaning against the railing. We've all had code put under a microscope. It's not the code, Sarah muttered. It's that they only care when it goes wrong. Not when it goes right. James nodded slowly. That's because most people only notice the plane when it crashes. They don't applaud every safe landing. That stuck with her. She didn't say anything. Just sat there, the metal stairs cold through her jeans, wondering how many more safe landings she could engineer before something broke. The next week was a blur of testing. Double reviews. Peer audits. Stress simulations. Ravi assigned Sarah to a new role, cross-verification of the passenger behavior matrix. It was boring. Important, but boring. And it pulled her away from the parts she loved most, the intuition modeling, the nuance, the empathy code. She didn't say no, because you didn't say no in crisis mode. But it drained her. She worked 14-hour days, eating at her desk, ignoring texts from Maya, skipping phone calls from her dad. The pressure was mounting. Everyone felt it. One afternoon, James slammed a keyboard so hard it snapped in half. Another team member quietly quit. The tension in the lab felt like walking through an electric field. Everything buzzed. No one laughed. Then came the betrayal. Sarah was reviewing the latest perception module logs when she noticed a change in the syntax she didn't recognize. Someone had refactored her decision logic, without notifying her. At first, she assumed it was an oversight. But when she traced the commit history, her stomach flipped. It was James. He'd rewritten one of her key subroutines to optimize response time, shaving milliseconds off processing speed but removing 2 of her intuitive response layers. The code was faster now, but dumber. Less human. She stormed into the lab, her voice low but shaking with fury. Why did you change my logic without telling me? James didn't even look surprised. It was inefficient. It was deliberate, she snapped. You stripped out adaptive foresight in unpredictable scenarios. Because those scenarios are rare, he said. And speed is non-negotiable. Sarah was shaking now. Not with fear, but with anger. You didn't even ask me. You didn't test it. You just decided your version was better. He stood. Taller than her. Broader. But she didn't flinch. We don't have time for consensus, he said. We have a deadline. This isn't about your ego. It's not ego, she said, cold. It's safety. They stared at each other for a long moment, the hum of servers around them like 1,000 quiet judges. Then she turned and walked out. She didn't go home. She didn't sleep. She spent the night in the backup lab, cloning the current build, running parallel simulations with her version of the logic versus his. And the results confirmed her worst fear. His code failed to account for hesitation in pedestrian movement. In 3 out of 10 edge case scenarios, the Robovan would have proceeded instead of pausing. In the real world, that could mean injury. Or worse. The next morning, she presented the data to Ravi. Calm. Professional. Devastated. Ravi read it all. Said nothing. Then he sighed. Revert it, he said quietly. Your lead on this module. You decide what ships. Sarah nodded. The wind felt hollow. Like surviving a crash. That night, she finally answered Maya's call. They talked for 45 minutes. Mostly about nothing. But near the end, Maya asked, "Why do you stay if it costs you so much?" Sarah didn't answer right away. She thought about the Robovan. About her father. About the girl she used to be, staring at the sky and wondering how machines could help people feel less alone. Because it matters, she finally said. Because if I don't stay, someone else might build it wrong. Maya didn't argue. She never did. She just said, then promise me you'll protect yourself too. Not just the code. Sarah promised. And part of her meant it. But another part, the bigger part, knew that promises were easier made than kept. Especially when the future was riding on your shoulders. And tomorrow, the first real-world demo ride was scheduled. With passengers. And press. And Elon. The sky over Palo Alto was colorless that morning, not quite gray, not quite blue, just a heavy haze that made everything feel slightly suspended, like the world was waiting to exhale. Sarah stood at the staging lot outside the Tesla campus, arms crossed, trying to slow her breathing as the first full-scale Robovan sat parked in the middle of the test route, humming softly like it was thinking. Today was the real thing. No simulations. No virtual passengers. No controlled environments. 5 human riders had been selected by Tesla PR to ride along for a 3-mile loop through live traffic, monitored by cameras, satellites, telemetry sensors, and about a dozen nervous engineers watching from a nearby command van. Elon was there too. Not in a suit this time, but in a casual black jacket and jeans, sipping something from a white thermal cup and occasionally glancing at his phone. He hadn't spoken to Sarah directly. Not yet. But she could feel his presence like gravity. Nervous? Ravi asked as he approached, his expression unreadable behind dark sunglasses. Only if I think about it, she replied. Then don't, he said. Just watch. You've done your part. The passengers arrived a few minutes later, a retired high school principal, a young couple from Berkeley, a wheelchair-bound software developer named Luis, and a middle-aged woman named Sandra, who worked in urban planning. Each had signed the waivers, gone through orientation, and now stood eyeing the vehicle like it was an animal they didn't quite trust. It looks friendly, the woman said, almost surprised. Sarah had designed the lighting accents and interface glows exactly for that response. She wanted people to feel welcomed, not transported. The doors opened with a soft whoosh, revealing an interior so minimalist it almost felt spiritual. No steering wheel. No dashboard. Just 6 contoured seats, a panoramic ceiling, and a soft LED strip that pulsed like a heartbeat. Each passenger climbed in slowly, guided by a Tesla technician who explained where to find the emergency call button, and used in every test so far. As they settled in, the van's internal AI initiated the greeting sequence. A soothing voice, gender-neutral and warm, spoke gently. Good morning. Welcome aboard. Your route today will take approximately 8 minutes. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, simply say, pause ride, and we will safely bring the vehicle to a stop. Sarah watched the screen inside the command van as the passengers nodded. Her eyes scanned the vitals, battery 96%, LiDAR sweep stable, GPS locked, backup systems green across the board. Then, with a soft chime, the Robovan pulled away from the curb. It moved like silk across the asphalt, merging into traffic without hesitation but not aggression. Its exterior sensors mapped everything in 360 degrees, feeding data to the onboard neural net trained on millions of scenarios. It stopped at a red light, perfectly aligned in the lane, not an inch over the line. The passengers were silent at first, then slowly began to talk among themselves. "It's smoother than I expected," the retired principal said. "Feels like I'm gliding." Luis nodded. "It's calculating everything, even the way people walk." He pointed at a pedestrian crossing the road half a block ahead. "Watch. It's slowing, just in case." It was. Sarah had built that behavior into the intuition model, the concept of anticipatory deceleration. The van didn't just react. It interpreted. Understood. Felt. A few blocks later, the Robovan approached a construction zone. Cones were laid out irregularly, and a human flagger was holding a stop sign. For a second, Sarah tensed. Construction had always been tricky. But the Robovan paused, recalculated, and made a soft turn around the flagged-off section, moving like a ballet dancer adjusting mid-step. The command van erupted in quiet celebration. Fist bumps. Nervous smiles. Ravi clapped once, loud. Elon glanced up from his phone, nodded once, then returned to scrolling. Sarah didn't celebrate. Not yet. 1 mile to go. Halfway through the route, a delivery truck double-parked in their lane. The Robovan hesitated, not with panic, but calculation, then slowly maneuvered around it, entering the adjacent lane only briefly before slipping back into position. The young couple in the van laughed. "I think it drives better than I do," the guy said. "It definitely signals more than you do," the woman replied, smirking. The van turned onto the final stretch, a slightly uphill road that curved right with a blind corner at the top. A known test point. Variable visibility. Sarah leaned forward instinctively. She had tuned the LiDAR sensitivity specifically for this. The vehicle crept into the curve with precision, hugging the inside line just enough to avoid potential conflict but not so much that it triggered evasive maneuvers. Then, from the opposing lane, a cyclist appeared, fast, too fast, and crossed slightly into the van's projected path. Sarah's breath caught. The Robovan recognized the deviation, predicted trajectory, applied minimal braking, and shifted 2 feet left. The cyclist passed. No one flinched. The ride continued. Luis turned to Sandra. "It feels like it knew that guy was coming before I did." "That's the point," she replied. "That's how cities get smarter. You put enough of these on the road, you reduce collisions. Reduce deaths. It's empathy," Luis said. "Just, digital." Sarah blinked hard. That line would stay with her. At last, the Robovan pulled into the return zone. Doors opened. Passengers exited slowly, thanking the technicians, looking stunned, not from fear, but from the absence of it. Like they'd expected something to go wrong and were now grappling with the fact that it hadn't. Elon approached the vehicle, leaned in, looked around inside. Then he turned to the assembled team. "That's how it should feel," he said. "That's what we ship." Sarah didn't smile. She just exhaled, finally, deeply, like she hadn't in days. The ride had gone perfectly. No errors. No fallback protocols. It had been clean. Alive. When the press asked Elon about the experience, he gave a short, practiced response. "We believe in a world where machines serve people quietly, efficiently, and without ego. The Robovan is a step toward that. And this is just the beginning." That afternoon, the footage went live on Tesla's channels. Within hours, it had over 5 million views. By nightfall, it was trending globally. Hashtags, #Robovan, hashtag Tesla Future, hashtag Empathy on Wheels. Sarah's name wasn't mentioned in the press release. It never was. But inside the lab, her team knew. They knew what she'd built, what she'd saved, what she'd fought for. James didn't say much after the ride. Just approached her as she was packing up and said, "You were right about the pause thresholds." She nodded. "You were right about the processing load." "We both were," he said. Good code's a conversation. For the first time, she felt like they were on the same team. Not just co-workers, but co-guardians of something new. She drove home late that night, too wired to sleep, too tired to celebrate. Her phone buzzed in the passenger seat. Maya. This time, Sarah answered on the first ring. "You did it," Maya said without preamble. "I watched the whole thing. Twice. It was beautiful." Sarah rested her head against the steering wheel. "I kept waiting for something to go wrong. And it didn't." "No," Sarah said. "Not this time." Maya's voice softened. "You know this is only the start, right?" "I know," Sarah whispered. "But for once, it feels like the start of something I want to keep walking toward." Outside her window, the city shimmered with streetlights and soft whirs of traffic, most of it still human. But that was going to change. The Robovan wasn't just a product. It was a path. And Sarah wasn't following it. She was laying it down, one line of code, one hard choice, one long night at a time. Tomorrow, the stress would return. The next challenge. The next compromise. But tonight, she had delivered something that moved through the world with grace. A machine that waited when someone hesitated. That turned gently. That knew how to pause. And in the quiet of that truth, Sarah finally smiled. It wasn't supposed to go public this fast. Just 48 hours after the test ride, Elon tweeted a cryptic line, "Next evolution in urban transport arrives this fall. Robovan is just the beginning." 1 minute later, Tesla's homepage updated with a countdown clock and a short looping video of the Robovan gliding silently through a clean, futuristic cityscape. There was no voiceover. No specs. Just music, motion, and the words, "Coming soon." That was all it took. The internet exploded. Blogs speculated everything from flying vans to solar charging street hubs. Stock tickers blinked green. Twitter, or X, as it was now officially called, lit up with hashtags and wild theories. Within 6 hours, the launch date had been confirmed, October 15th. 3 months from now. Internally, that meant everything changed overnight. The team went from innovation mode to execution mode. Elon's tweet had locked them in. There was no going back. Sarah sat in the war room surrounded by whiteboards, screens, coffee cups, and engineers who looked like they hadn't slept in days. Her eyes flicked between lines of code, mock-up UI screens, and a checklist titled Critical Path, Red Zone. It included 74 bullet points. 37 of them had her name beside them. The Robovan wasn't just a vehicle anymore. It was a launch product. And she was now responsible not just for behavior and perception, but for making sure it worked flawlessly at scale. No edge case bugs. No crashes. No surprises. It wasn't enough for the Robovan to be impressive. It had to be bulletproof. "I need 2 more engineers to cover the real-time telemetry bridge," she said out loud, half to herself, half to Ravi. He glanced up from his screen, rubbing his face. "Already stretched. You'll have to train someone from UI. They won't know the behavior architecture," she argued. "Then teach fast," he replied. "We're building a system for millions. No more solo heroes." That line stung. Because Sarah knew she'd been functioning like one, trying to own too much, fix too much herself. But she also knew what was at stake. One mistake at this stage, and it wasn't just a bug. It was a liability. A lawsuit. A headline. So she relented. Created a training module. Held a workshop. Started delegating parts of her code base, reluctantly, with the precision of a surgeon handing off her own organs. Meanwhile, James had been moved to lead compliance integration, making sure the Robovan passed every local and federal standard for autonomous commercial vehicles. They were on speaking terms now, even sharing notes, though tension still simmered under the surface. He still believed in performance above all else. She still believed in trust and intuition. But their debates had become productive. Somewhere in the friction, they found traction. Still, the pace was brutal. Every day started before sunrise and bled into the next. Some nights she slept in the office, curled up under her desk with noise-canceling headphones and her jacket for a pillow. She missed calls from Maya. Texts from her dad piled up unread. She hadn't seen the sky in daylight for what felt like weeks. But every time she watched the Robovan glide through another live test, every time the logs came back clean, she felt a flicker of something like hope. Like purpose. One afternoon, halfway through August, she got an invite to a meeting she hadn't expected, Elon/Robovan Future Strategy/Confidential. The location wasn't virtual. It was SpaceX HQ. She flew down to Hawthorne the next day on a company jet, alongside Ravi and a few others. James wasn't invited. That surprised her. The meeting room looked like something out of a sci-fi thriller, glass walls, metal floors, sleek chairs around a circular table. Elon walked in 5 minutes late, carrying nothing but a notepad and an aura of focused restlessness. "We're going to Mars," he said, no hello, no context. "But we can't get there without fixing Earth first." That was how it began. A 2-hour vision session. Elon talked, mostly. Described not just the Robovan, but its future siblings. Robopods for delivery, robo-shuttles for school transport, robo-ambulances with real-time triage. All electric. All autonomous. All connected through a neural transport web that responded to demand, weather, and emergency prioritization. "Cities today are built for traffic," he said. "The future will be built for flow. AI-managed motion. Robovan is the prototype for that ecosystem." Then he turned to Sarah. "The empathy code, you built it?" She nodded. "With help. It changes everything," he said. "People won't just ride. They'll trust." Her heart thudded. Then he asked, what would it take to scale it globally in 24 months? Her brain went blank for a second. Then it rebooted. "Multilingual training data," she replied. "Geo-specific behavior sets. Regional laws. Edge case biases. And a lot more people." He nodded slowly. "You'll get them. Start building the global logic layer. We'll handle the rest." That was it. A directive. An assignment. A promotion, maybe. She didn't know. But by the time she flew back to Palo Alto, she understood that the Robovan wasn't the finish line. It was the gateway. Her life after that changed again. She got her own team. 7 people. Then 10. Then 15. The team was called Human First Autonomy, or HFA. Its only mission, to make sure the Robovan acted less like a machine and more like something passengers could trust with their children. They tested everything. How the van should behave if someone dropped a phone and bent to pick it up. How it should react to drunk passengers. What to do when a rider suddenly broke down in tears. Sarah insisted on building not just logic, but presence. The Robovan needed to feel like it was with you. A companion, not a tool. Her team ran hundreds of simulations a day. Added microdelays in braking to mimic human awareness. Smoothed acceleration curves. Even tested how the voice interface should respond to different tones of distress. What if someone yells at it? One engineer asked. Then it should ask calmly if they're okay, Sarah said. And if they swear at it? Same answer. It wasn't about obedience. It was about emotional safety. And that was a different kind of intelligence. By September, the Robovan had completed over 100,000 autonomous miles across 4 cities. Data showed it performed better than human drivers in nearly every metric: collision avoidance, fuel efficiency, passenger comfort. But none of that meant anything if people didn't trust it. That was Sarah's obsession now. Trust. Not just from passengers, but from the world. That month, Tesla approved a pilot program for Austin, 50 Robovans operating in real-time public routes, offering free rides to volunteers. It was a bold move. And a risky one. Sarah flew down for the launch, riding the first Austin van herself. It was early morning when she boarded, sky still dark, city half asleep. She sat beside an elderly woman named Marlene, who clutched her purse tightly and smiled nervously. "Never been in one of these before," she said. "I'm used to buses." Sarah nodded. "It's just like a bus. Just a bit quieter." Marlene looked around. "Feels kind of like a spaceship." Then, after a moment, "It's nice." The van began to move. Smooth. Confident. It turned at the right places, paused gently when a jogger appeared out of nowhere, signaled patiently when merging. And halfway through the ride, Marlene said something Sarah would never forget. "You know, I think I could fall asleep in this thing. That's how safe it feels." That night, Sarah stood on a downtown sidewalk, watching one Robovan after another glide by, quiet, seamless, intelligent. And for the first time in months, she felt something close to peace. It was working. It was real. And it was only the beginning. 3 weeks out from launch and everything felt like it was teetering between brilliance and disaster. The Robovan was now running pilot routes not just in Austin, but in Las Vegas and Phoenix as well, each city presenting its own flavor of chaos. Austin had heat and unpredictable pedestrians. Las Vegas had overwhelming lights, human distractions, and strange intersections built for tourists more than efficiency. Phoenix, meanwhile, had wide suburban streets but aggressive drivers who didn't care about the concept of yield. Sarah monitored all of it from the war room, a glass-encased nerve center inside Tesla's Palo Alto campus with rows of monitors, real-time maps, incoming telemetry streams, and the ever-growing mountain of passenger feedback. At any given moment, Sarah could click into any Robovan across the 3 cities and see what it saw: traffic, pedestrians, curves, sudden road debris, construction cones, storm drain dips, the occasional darting cat. She didn't sleep much anymore. Her apartment had become a storage locker where she rotated clean clothes and recharged her badge. Most nights, she stayed until 2 a.m., working on behavioral edge cases, reviewing camera footage frame by frame, refining emotional context libraries, listening to passengers whisper things like, "Did you see how it waited for that woman with the stroller?" Or, "I don't know why, but it feels like it cares." Those moments made everything worth it. But not everything was perfect. One Thursday afternoon, the Robovan in Phoenix suddenly braked too hard while approaching a school zone. No one was hurt. The internal logs showed that it had detected a dog near the curb and interpreted its pacing as potential darting behavior. The system was doing what it was supposed to, erring on the side of caution. But the sudden stop sent 2 passengers lurching forward, even with seatbelts. One bumped their head. Nothing serious. But the local press found out within hours. The headline was sharp, clickbait, and devoid of nuance: Tesla Robovan slams brakes in school zone, passenger injured. Elon was furious. Not at Sarah, not even at the code. He was furious at perception. That safety was being penalized. That caution wasn't newsworthy unless it looked like failure. He walked into the war room that night unannounced, stood in front of the main screen displaying all 127 Robovans, and said, "This thing saves lives. We will not apologize for that." Then he turned to Sarah. "But it needs to be smoother. Smarter. We need to trust it, but also teach it not to scare people while doing the right thing." That became the next phase of her work, refining judgment. Not just reacting with precision, but reacting with grace. She and her team rewrote entire response trees for dynamic deceleration. If the Robovan had to stop, it would do so like a human with experience, feathering the brakes, checking mirrors, preparing the cabin for impact. They even added a new feature, verbal prompts when unexpected stops occurred. A soft voice would now say, "Slowing for your safety, thank you for your patience," in a dozen languages depending on passenger settings. It helped. Not just mechanically, but psychologically. People relaxed when they felt informed. Sarah also pushed for a new initiative, direct rider feedback collected mid-ride through a voice assistant. Instead of filling out surveys later, passengers could say things like, "That was a little fast," or "I liked that turn," and have their comments anonymously routed to the training data. James wasn't thrilled. "We're over-engineering," he said one night. "This isn't a therapist. It's a vehicle." "It's both," Sarah countered. "If people don't feel heard, they won't adopt it." "We're not building relationships," he said. "We're building routes." She didn't argue further. He was technically right. But she was emotionally right. And the Robovan's adoption rates in Austin were already proving her point. Over 70% of first-time riders said they'd ride again. More than half said they trusted it more than a taxi driver. Several had posted videos praising how calm it felt. Calm. That was the word that mattered most to her. Not safe, not fast, not efficient. Calm meant people felt protected without having to think about it. Calm was the highest praise for a machine meant to navigate chaos. But stress returned quickly. Just 10 days before the official launch, a rival company leaked a video clip of a Robovan in a complex merge scenario. The clip showed the vehicle hesitating slightly as it tried to re-enter a crowded lane. It eventually did, smoothly and without issue. But the video was edited to highlight the pause. The caption read, "Tesla's Robovan unsure what to do in traffic. Would you trust your family to this?" It went viral. Elon's response was blunt. He tweeted, "Reality is complicated. Perfection is a process. The Robovan doesn't guess, it calculates. We don't hesitate. We care." It got 1 million likes. But internally, Tesla went into full lockdown mode. PR teams worked double shifts. Engineers were told to triple-check every confidence threshold. Sarah was asked to personally review the footage. "It was the right move," she said after watching. "We paused because a motorcycle was hidden in the blind spot. The system detected a potential acceleration burst from it. It waited exactly 2.1 seconds. That saved a life." But public sentiment didn't care about milliseconds or logic trees. It cared about optics. About headlines. Still, Sarah kept going. That weekend, she visited her father for the first time in months. He'd been recovering from a minor surgery, and she'd made every excuse to delay the visit, too tired, too busy, too broken. But now, she needed to see him. Not for him. For her. He sat in his favorite chair, same faded sweater, same coffee mug, still watching documentaries about deep space and old NASA footage. "So this van," he said, after she explained everything. "It drives better than people." "It's trying to," she replied. "But not just better. Kinder." He raised an eyebrow. "Machines can be kind. Only if we teach them how." He sipped, nodded. "Sounds like you're doing more than building a car." "It doesn't feel like a car anymore," she said quietly. "Feels like a promise." He looked at her, really looked, and for a moment she saw the man who once drove her to school every morning, who waited for her outside dance class even after her mom left, who sat through late-night science fairs and broken-hearted phone calls. "Then keep the promise," he said. "But don't lose yourself to it." She hugged him when she left. Tighter than usual. And that night, back in Palo Alto, as she walked into the lab, she realized something. The Robovan wasn't her legacy. It was her letter to the world. A message that machines could be made with empathy. That AI didn't have to be cold, ruthless, alien. That in a future of endless acceleration, there could still be space for a gentle stop. For a soft voice that said, "It's okay. I've got you." And now, just 1 week remained until the world would see if that message would be heard. The launch week began with a thunderstorm over Palo Alto, a rare weather anomaly in early October, with sheets of rain pounding the city like the sky itself was anxious. Sarah stood under the glass canopy outside the Tesla campus, watching the wet streets and thinking how perfectly symbolic it felt, everything clean, everything uncertain. Inside the building, final preparations were underway for the public reveal. Tesla had planned a full-scale media event at the Fremont factory, where Elon would deliver his keynote on stage next to 2 production Robovans, both fully autonomous and freshly painted in Tesla's new soft gray and pearl-white scheme. One van was nicknamed Aurora by the internal team, the other, Echo. But while everyone was focused on the reveal, Sarah was focused on something more important, the behavior stack that would run under real-world load in front of thousands of eyes. This wasn't a simulation. This wasn't an internal test. This was the day the Robovan would make its debut as a product in the world, live-streamed globally, and open to scrutiny from skeptics, engineers, investors, journalists, regulators, and, most crucially, the public. Elon's instructions had been clear: no pre-recorded demos, no manual overrides, no illusions. Let it speak for itself, he had said. If it fails, let it fail honestly. But if it works, people will feel it. So the plan was bold. After his keynote, Elon would invite 5 randomly selected audience members to ride the Robovan across a designated route that looped through the Tesla campus, past a few obstacles, a pedestrian crosswalk, a fake construction detour, and a tricky left-turn intersection that still gave most human drivers a moment of hesitation. The van would handle it all, live. No driver. No wheel. No apologies. Sarah barely slept the night before. She stayed with her team until 3:30 a.m., triple-checking the routing instructions, reviewing every sensor's diagnostic output, recalibrating LiDAR baselines, and running simulation overlays of possible curveballs, fallen signposts, animals, weather distortions, even confused pedestrians waving with too much enthusiasm. Her anxiety wasn't just about technical failure. It was about emotional betrayal. She had built the Robovan not as a machine to impress, but as a machine to be trusted. To disappoint now would be to prove every doubter right. At sunrise, she changed into a clean white blouse, black blazer, and jeans. Not for the cameras, she didn't care about that, but because she wanted to feel steady. Rooted. Whole. When she arrived at Fremont, the scene was electric. Hundreds of media personnel, employees, and VIPs lined up outside the massive event space. A Tesla semi-truck had been retrofitted into a portable stage. A giant countdown screen glowed overhead. Music pulsed softly. Drones hovered like curious birds. The Robovans, Aurora and Echo, sat side by side under a translucent tarp, their lights off, silent, waiting. Sarah joined her team backstage. Ravi handed her a tablet displaying the real-time diagnostics for both vans. All green, he said. No flags. Backup LiDAR online, she asked. Double verified. Speech module warmed. Running smooth. Okay. She exhaled. Let's trust it. At exactly 11 a.m., Elon walked onto the stage as the countdown hit 0. The crowd erupted. He wore his usual black jacket and expression of intense curiosity, like he was half present, half thinking 10 years ahead. "We are here today," he began, "to reimagine what it means to move. Not just faster. Not just cleaner. But with intelligence. With grace. With empathy." He gestured toward the covered vehicles. "The Robovan is our first fully autonomous people mover. Built not just to drive, but to understand. Not just to calculate, but to care. And today, for the first time, it will drive you, live." Applause. The tarp was pulled back. Both Robovans activated, lights flickering to life, exteriors gleaming under the bright sun now breaking through the dissipating clouds. They looked less like cars and more like mobile sanctuaries, smooth edges, warm light bars, almost inviting. Elon continued, "We're going to let the Robovan speak for itself. 5 volunteers. 1 route. Let's begin." The names were randomly selected via a live draw. A retired nurse, a software developer, a high school student, a city planner from Oakland, and an actor from LA. Sarah watched them board the van, Aurora. They climbed inside slowly, a little stiffly, some with smiles, others visibly skeptical. The doors closed. The cabin's internal interface came alive. "Welcome aboard," said the Robovan in its soft voice. "Today's route will take approximately 7 minutes. Thank you for riding." Then it moved. Slowly at first. Then confidently. The camera drones followed overhead as it rolled down the designated path. At the pedestrian crosswalk, a Tesla employee stepped forward in front of it, playing the role of an indecisive walker. The Robovan paused gently, gave them time, then proceeded once the way was clear. No jerkiness. No hesitation. Just calm awareness. At the construction detour, 2 orange cones and a blocked lane, it recalculated without human input, made a gentle 3-point turn around the obstacle, and returned to its course. The audience gasped. People clapped. The van made the left turn flawlessly, waiting for just the right moment in a break of traffic. A human might have rushed. It didn't. Sarah's eyes stayed on the telemetry, balance nominal, lateral torque minimal, acceleration curve optimal. Her hands were ice. Her mind, fire. The Robovan completed the loop in 6 minutes and 44 seconds. Not once did it falter. Not once did it override. When it returned, the doors opened and the 5 passengers stepped out, silent at first. Then the nurse said, "I didn't even notice we were moving. That's how peaceful it felt." The student added, "I would let this drive my mom." The crowd erupted. Elon smiled. "We are now taking reservations," he said. "Production begins next quarter." And that was it. The Robovan was no longer an idea. It was a product. A presence. A promise fulfilled. After the event, as executives mingled and reporters scrambled for interviews, Sarah slipped away to the edge of the event space. She stood alone for a moment, watching the now idling Robovan parked quietly, almost as if it were resting. Elon found her there. No cameras. No entourage. Just the 2 of them and the lingering energy of something historic. "It worked," he said. "You made it work." She nodded, unsure how to respond. "This isn't the end," he added. "We're going to deploy these everywhere. Cities. Airports. Colleges. Medical centers. Global reach within 2 years. You ready for that?" "I think so," she said. Then paused. "No. I know so." He nodded. "We'll need you in the lead. You're not just a coder anymore. You're the soul of this thing. And the world's going to need a lot more soul." Then he walked away. Later that night, Sarah sat in a quiet part of the Fremont campus, alone with her thoughts. She scrolled through early news coverage, headlines like, Tesla redefines public transit, Elon's Robovan delivers calm revolution, AI learns to wait, not rush. She watched replays of the ride, listening again to the passengers' reactions. There was no screaming, no applause inside the cabin. Just wonder. Quiet, reverent wonder. That, she thought, was the measure of success, not spectacle, not speed, but stillness. A machine so competent it disappeared. So thoughtful it vanished into the background. For the first time in years, she felt peace. Not pride. Not triumph. Just a soft exhale of knowing that she had done something right. Not perfect. But right. Her phone buzzed. A message from Maya, saw the launch. You did it. When you breathe again, call me. Sarah smiled. And for the first time in months, she replied immediately, tonight. I'm finally ready. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Sarah hadn't had a real night off in months, but the evening after the launch felt like stepping back into a version of her life she barely remembered. After weeks of grind, of debugging near-sleepless code, of wondering whether the public would embrace or ridicule everything they'd built, the silence that followed success was almost jarring. She had called Maya like she promised. They met at a little wine bar not far from downtown Palo Alto, one of those modern minimalist places where no one asked what you did for work and where the candles flickered low and unbothered. You look taller, Maya said, teasing her as they hugged. Stress stretches people. Sarah laughed. Or maybe carrying $1 billion promise on my back gave me posture. They ordered 2 glasses of something dry and red, and Sarah found herself talking, really talking, for the first time in what felt like forever. Not about systems or stack architecture or emotional latency thresholds. Just about being tired, being scared, being proud in strange, quiet ways that didn't fit into a press release or a keynote speech. Maya listened with the patience of someone who had known Sarah since they were teenagers, back when the most complex decisions in their lives involved high school projects and whether or not to text back someone you liked. So what happens now? Maya finally asked, her eyes soft but curious. What happens to you? That was the question Sarah had been avoiding. She had lived so completely in the Robovan world that she hadn't looked ahead. Not really. The project was alive now. Autonomous, in every sense of the word. She could keep running forward, yes, but toward what? There's talk of global expansion, Sarah said. More cities, more use cases. Specialized Robovans, ones for hospitals, ones for schools, ones for the elderly. Elon wants me to lead behavioral design worldwide. Maya raised her eyebrows. That's big. It's huge. So you're taking it? Sarah hesitated. I should. But I haven't said yes yet. Why not? Sarah looked down into her glass, swirling the wine. Because I don't know if the part of me that built this, is the same part that can scale it. She meant it. The Sarah who had poured her soul into building empathy logic, who had fought for moments of human softness in a machine, it wasn't clear if that version of her would survive the corporate march ahead. There would be more deadlines, more politics, more dilution of purpose. And she wasn't sure she could do it again without losing something vital. Maya leaned in. You created something that makes people feel safe, Sarah. Not just move from A to B, safe. That matters. So whatever you do next, just don't forget that part of yourself. It's the rarest thing in this whole industry. They left the bar after midnight, and Sarah walked home, letting the quiet of the streets settle around her like a gentle cloak. She didn't make a decision that night. But something inside her began to shift, not a conclusion, but a soft opening. A readiness to ask bigger questions. The next morning, her calendar was already filling up. Meetings with urban planning consultants. Interviews with global media. A debrief with the Tesla executive team. But she also received an unexpected email, short and direct, from Elon@tesla.com, subject, Tokyo. Let's visit the pilot's site next week. Want you to see what they're doing with the medical fleet. Bring Ravi. Optional, bring James. That last line made her pause. James hadn't been around during the launch. He'd watched it from a distance, apparently, working on a parallel initiative focused on fleet safety diagnostics. Their dynamic had cooled into something neutral, respectful, maybe even friendly. But they hadn't had a real conversation since before the keynote. She walked down the hall to his lab around noon, tablet in hand, and found him elbow-deep in code, as always. "You hear about Tokyo?" she asked. He nodded without looking up. "I'm going. You want to come with?" That got his attention. He looked up, eyes narrowing slightly, not with suspicion, but calculation. "Why me?" "Because you still care about what happens after we ship." He sat back, considering. Then nodded once. "Okay." The flight to Tokyo 3 days later felt like a time capsule. She hadn't traveled internationally since before the Robovan program had kicked into high gear. The world outside Tesla had continued on its own rhythms. Families boarding planes, business travelers tapping at keyboards, couples falling asleep on each other's shoulders. She sat beside Ravi while James took a window seat across the aisle. They didn't talk much, but it wasn't awkward. It was the calm of people who had been through the fire and come out with a kind of forged camaraderie. Tokyo greeted them with its usual neon pulse and quiet discipline. The pilot site was located near Shibuya, a specialized hospital complex that had begun using a fleet of 5 medical Robovans to transport patients between care centers. The concept was revolutionary. Each van was equipped not just for passenger comfort, but for medical monitoring, heart rate, temperature, even emergency alert buttons. And all fully autonomous. A Tesla engineer named Emmy greeted them at the site. Petite, focused, with a calm intensity that reminded Sarah of herself, Emmy wasted no time. "We've transported over 2,000 patients in 4 weeks, she said, leading them through a garage where the medical Robovan sat idle but alert. 0 incidents. 98% positive feedback. The average rider age is 72. Sarah stepped inside one of the vans and immediately noticed the differences. The lighting was warmer. There were handrails, soft seats with extra lumbar support, even a built-in display offering relaxation visuals, floating koi fish, autumn leaves. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. Emmy nodded. They were nervous at first. But now they ask for it. Some say they trust it more than their kids driving. Sarah felt a lump rise in her throat. It was working. Not just technically, but emotionally. These machines weren't replacing human care. They were extending it. Later that night, back at the hotel, James knocked on her door. He stood there in a black t-shirt, holding a can of coffee. "Walk?" She nodded. They strolled the narrow streets for half an hour, saying little. Then he finally broke the silence. "You were right, you know. About trust." She looked at him. "Takes a lot to say that." "I didn't get it before," he said. "I thought performance was the product. But watching that old woman get into the van today, I realize performance doesn't matter if people don't feel safe." She nodded. "Exactly. So," he said, "are you going to take the global lead job?" "Probably. But I'm scared I'll lose sight of the soul if I do." "Then don't let it happen. Lead from the soul. Bring people with you who believe in it. That's what real leadership is." She stopped walking. Looked at him. And in that moment, everything felt clear. Not easy. Not resolved. But clear. She was going to take the role. But she was going to build it on her terms. With soul. With empathy. With the quiet courage to believe that even machines could carry human kindness across the world. Sarah returned from Tokyo changed, not in a loud, triumphant way some people come back from international trips with selfies and souvenirs, but in the quiet, internal way that rewires your sense of purpose. What she saw in Japan was not just innovation. It was proof that the Robovan was capable of adapting across cultures, of becoming more than just another piece of Silicon Valley tech exported to the world. It could be local. It could be human. It could be necessary. Back at the Palo Alto headquarters, her promotion became official. Effective immediately, Sarah was named Global Director of Human-Centered AI Integration for Tesla Mobility. The title was long and a little clunky, but what it meant was simple: she was now in charge of how the Robovan would interact with the world. Every language pack, every behavior model, every emotional nuance the system expressed, her team would build it, test it, and ship it. The scope was overwhelming. But she didn't feel overwhelmed. She felt anchored. She began assembling a team not just of AI specialists, but of people who understood the complexity of human emotion across cultures: anthropologists, linguists, cognitive scientists. She hired a former hospice nurse from Germany to consult on end-of-life transportation dignity. She brought in a neurodiversity expert to advise on how the Robovan could better serve autistic passengers. She partnered with universities in Brazil, India, and South Africa to understand how trust in machines varied from city to city. Empathy is not a one-size-fits-all model, she told her staff in their first global briefing. It needs context. Culture. History. We're not just writing software, we're writing stories. And every story begins with listening. Meanwhile, the Robovan continued to gain traction in the U.S. Tesla opened pilot programs in Miami, Denver, Seattle, and Chicago. In Miami, retirees praised its smooth boarding features. In Denver, ski resorts requested versions adapted for gear and cold weather. Seattle wanted an all-weather, bike-friendly option. And in Chicago, one fleet was assigned specifically to late-night workers with unreliable public transit access. The success was undeniable. But with success came scrutiny. A viral video emerged of a Robovan in Los Angeles where a street performer suddenly leapt into its path to test how smart it really is. The van stopped perfectly, but the clip, edited for drama, suggested hesitation. Critics jumped on it, saying Tesla was gambling with public safety. The man was unharmed, but the moment trended for days under hashtags like #Robofail and #Elon's new toy. Sarah responded personally. In a live interview on NPR, she explained the system's layered response model and calmly broke down the precise logic tree the van had followed. It didn't hesitate, she said. It calculated. It made a choice to preserve life and dignity, two things we can't afford to rush. The interview went viral too, but in a different way. People began to understand that the Robovan wasn't magic, it was engineered ethics. And Sarah became the unexpected face of it. Requests for keynote appearances began pouring in. Universities, urban planning panels, even United Nations forums. Elon encouraged her to speak. "Let the world see why we built this," he said. "They'll believe it if they hear it from you." But Sarah was cautious. She didn't want to become a brand. She didn't want to be the next tech celebrity. She just wanted the work to speak. Still, she agreed to one event, the Global Future Mobility Summit in Geneva. It was an international gathering of transportation leaders, policymakers, and activists. And it would be the first time she addressed a crowd entirely outside Tesla's ecosystem. Her team worked with her on the speech, but Sarah insisted on writing the final version alone. She spent nights walking around her apartment, thinking, pacing, scribbling half-thoughts on post-it notes, voice memoing ideas at 3 a.m. Finally, it came to her, simple, clear, from the heart. When the day came, she stood in a minimalist white dress on a stage in Geneva, facing a sea of skeptical faces. People who had seen too many failed promises. People who didn't want more apps or automation, they wanted meaning. We used to think machines were cold, she began. That they couldn't feel, couldn't care, couldn't understand what it meant to be human. But what if the problem wasn't the machine, but the teacher? The room quieted. She walked slowly, deliberately. The Robovan isn't just a vehicle. It's a listener. It's a student of human behavior. It waits. It watches. It learns. Not just from code, but from you. From all of us. It learns when to slow down for an elderly passenger. It learns when a child might dart into the street. It learns that trust isn't built in milliseconds. It's built in moments. And those moments matter. She paused, looking out at the crowd. Autonomy isn't about removing the human. It's about respecting the human. Giving back time. Dignity. Calm. And yes, empathy. Because if we can teach machines to care, even just a little, then maybe we're not automating ourselves out of humanity. Maybe we're designing our way back into it. A beat. Then applause. Not wild. But real. People stood. Some cried. That night, her inbox overflowed with messages from mayors, ministers, and mothers. A woman in Kenya wrote, "I take care of my disabled son. If what you're building can give me 1 hour of rest, then I believe in you." A teacher in Iceland said, "I want a Robovan for my students. Some of them walk miles in the dark." Sarah read every word. She saved them. Printed some. And somewhere deep inside, she knew her job wasn't just to expand a product, it was to expand hope. But as always, the next challenge was already arriving. Elon called her late one night. "We need to talk about Detroit," he said. "There's a situation." Detroit was supposed to be the Heartland launch, the first fully integrated urban deployment in a major U.S. city known for its automotive history. The symbolism was intentional. Tesla was reclaiming the future on the soil where the old industry began. But things weren't going smoothly. Local unions were pushing back, afraid the Robovan would eliminate jobs. City council members were split. Some saw it as progress. Others saw it as betrayal. And worst of all, a data leak suggested someone inside Tesla had been feeding information to a rival company, a startup trying to clone the Robovan experience under a different name. "I need you in Detroit," Elon said. "Tomorrow." Sarah packed a bag. As the plane lifted off the runway toward Michigan, she looked out the window and wondered, how do you teach trust to people who have already lost so much? How do you bring a machine into a place that remembers what it's like to be left behind? But more than that, she thought about the Robovan itself. And the idea that maybe it wasn't a machine anymore. Maybe it had become something else entirely. A bridge. A mirror. A quiet revolution in motion. Detroit didn't roll out the red carpet. It rolled out a challenge. The city, toughened by generations of industry and resilience, wasn't dazzled by Tesla's sleek lines or polished pitches. Where some saw progress, many in Detroit saw ghosts, factories shuttered, pensions lost, families uprooted in the name of advancement. So when Sarah stepped off the plane and into the rainy, gray morning, she felt the difference instantly. This wasn't Tokyo. This wasn't Geneva. This was the belly of the old beast, and it didn't trust easily. Her first meeting was with a local councilman named Roy Chandler, a gruff but fair man in his 50s who'd worked at a Ford plant before getting into politics. "I've read about you," he said without shaking her hand. "They say you made the machine that listens." Sarah smiled, politely. "That's the goal." "Well," he said, gesturing to the window of his office, which overlooked a long vacant factory lot, "you're gonna have to do a lot more than listen here. Folks don't want another company parachuting in, replacing drivers with code and calling it innovation." "We're not replacing people," Sarah said. "We're trying to fill gaps. Provide options. It's not about taking jobs, it's about meeting needs where systems have failed. Maybe, he said, sitting down and lacing his fingers. But tell that to the kid who thought he'd be driving a bus like his dad, only to find out it's a tablet on wheels doing the job instead. That night, Sarah walked the streets of Detroit alone. The city had grit, layers, a pulse that beat slower but no less strong. She passed murals of workers, tributes to Motown legends, and boarded-up storefronts sitting beside brand-new cafes. Contradictions everywhere. She stopped outside a closed auto shop and watched a man across the street walk with two children in heavy coats. They looked tired. It was only 7:30. She wondered how long their commute had been. The next day, she requested a tour of one of the underserved neighborhoods identified in Tesla's pilot plan. She brought along two Robovans, Echo and a new one named Juniper, freshly retrofitted with more durable suspension and better cold weather handling. At first, no one came near. The vans sat silently near a community center, their LED lights softly glowing, almost embarrassed to be there. But then a teacher came out. Then a mother. Then a few curious teens. A boy no older than 12 circled Juniper on his bike, eyes wide. "It's real?" he asked. "It drives itself?" Sarah knelt down beside him. "Want to see?" He nodded. She tapped a code into her tablet, and the Robovan gently opened its door. The boy stepped inside, looking around like he was in a spaceship. "It smells nice," he said. Sarah laughed. "We added air filtration and warm lighting. Makes it feel less like a machine." He sat in the seat and looked at the display panel. "Can it take me to school?" "That's the plan." She watched his expression change, not excited, exactly. More, relieved. As if something impossible had just become possible. Word spread. Over the next few days, Sarah met with parents, teachers, local organizers. She invited them into the vans, let them suggest changes. Can the seats be easier to clean? Can you add a call button for emergencies? Some of our elderly passengers speak only Arabic. Will the system understand them? Sarah took notes. Implemented fast updates. Added a direct feedback loop from community riders into the system's daily diagnostic uploads. She even sat with a group of high schoolers and asked them what it would take for them to feel safe riding alone. One girl, Kayla, said, "Make it say my name. Like, 'Hi Kayla, I'm here to take you to class.' Not just 'boarding confirmed.' I want it to feel like someone knows me." That night, Sarah had the dev team push a test update. The next morning, the Robovan addressed Kayla by name, thanked her for getting in, and offered 3 music choices based on her past preferences. Kayla's smile was all the proof Sarah needed. But not everyone was swayed. A protest formed outside a city council meeting. Handwritten signs read, "People before profits," and "Detroit isn't your lab." Some chanted. Some shouted. One man threw a small rock at a stationary Robovan. It bounced harmlessly off, but the gesture was loud. Sarah didn't flinch. She walked out and faced the crowd. "I'm not here to replace anyone," she said. "I'm here because a grandmother on the east side missed her dialysis appointment last week due to a bus delay. I'm here because some neighborhoods don't get reliable service after 7 p.m. I'm here because children should never have to walk 3 miles in the snow just to get an education. This isn't about taking away. It's about giving back." Some listened. Some didn't. But slowly, trust began to form. She met with union leaders, not as adversaries but as allies. She asked them to co-design future roles, Robovan maintenance crews, in-vehicle safety monitors, AI behavior auditors. Jobs that didn't exist before but could now. "We need people," she told them. "This isn't automation without humanity. It's automation with responsibility." The turning point came 2 weeks later. A snowstorm blanketed the city, and traditional transport systems ground to a halt. Buses stalled. Rideshare prices surged. But the Robovans, equipped with advanced navigation and real-time storm response logic, kept moving. Quietly. Steadily. Safely. Sarah personally monitored every route that night. And at 10:42 p.m., one of the vans safely delivered a dialysis patient home after her appointment. Another took a nurse to her night shift. A third picked up 3 stranded teens walking home from their after-school jobs. The community center posted a message on social media: when everything else stopped, they kept going. Thank you, Tesla Robovan. The post went viral, not because of slick branding, but because of sincerity. Real people. Real impact. The next day, Councilman Chandler called her. I still don't trust the machines, he said. But I'm starting to trust you. That's a start, Sarah replied. I'll take it. Back at Tesla HQ, Elon called to check in. Heard you melted a little ice in Detroit, he said, amused. It's still winter, she said. But yeah. The ground's softening. Good, he said. Because next, we go global. Middle East. Africa. Eastern Europe. Places with bigger gaps to fill. She exhaled. The work never ended. But it was worth it. Before she left Detroit, she returned to the community center one last time. The boy who'd first ridden Juniper was there again. This time, with his mother. He won't stop talking about it, she said. And now his sister wants to go, too. Sarah smiled. We've added more vans. She's welcome anytime. The boy looked up at her. Is it true you made it think? She crouched again, eye level. I helped it learn to listen. And when it listens well enough, it starts to understand. He nodded slowly, then asked, can it learn to dream? Sarah paused. Then said, maybe. But if it does, it'll be dreaming about you. By the time Sarah returned to Palo Alto, the Robovan was no longer just a product, it had become a movement. What started as a sleek piece of hardware had transformed into a story that was unfolding in cities, towns, and quiet corners across the globe. From Tokyo to Detroit, the van's presence was no longer alien or threatening. It was helpful, sometimes even beloved. And Sarah, whether she wanted the title or not, was becoming the movement's voice. Tesla's global expansion strategy was aggressive. With the US and parts of Asia already showing strong adoption, the next phase was centered on Europe and the Middle East. The mission: deploy Robovan fleets in 3 major cities, Berlin, Dubai, and Warsaw, within 6 months. Elon's directive was clear: don't just launch. Land. Learn. Integrate. But before any public debut, Tesla would run limited access pilot programs in each city, focusing on high-need populations and difficult terrains. Make the Robovan adaptable or we've failed, Elon had said. Sarah knew this phase would stretch them to the edge. Each region brought its own set of challenges: linguistic, political, infrastructural. The city of Berlin, for instance, had strict data privacy laws, and its citizens were already skeptical of surveillance or autonomous systems. In Dubai, luxury was expected, and any technical flaw would be scrutinized by a highly competitive transport market. Warsaw presented its own complexity, as many parts of the city still bore the scars of rapid urban transformation, and local transport unions were wary of losing relevance. So Sarah did what she always did: she listened. In Berlin, she met with regulators and advocacy groups. She invited data privacy watchdogs to audit Tesla systems, even offering transparency dashboards that visualized what the Robovan did, and didn't, track. She hosted community events where residents could step into the vans, touch the tech, and voice their concerns. When one elderly woman asked, "Will it remember me?" Sarah added a new protocol: memory modes that could recall preferred routes and greeting languages for repeat passengers, stored securely and anonymized by default. In Dubai, she walked through the streets with city planners, noting the desert heat, the sudden sandstorms, the culture of comfort that defined how people moved. She commissioned a redesign of the Robovan's climate control system, integrating fast-cooling tech used in high-performance electric vehicles. A new variant of the van, called Mirage, was born. It boasted silk-touch seats, gold-accented interfaces, and custom AI voice options with local dialects. Some critics scoffed at it as excessive. But the Dubai riders didn't. It wasn't about flash, it was about respect. In Warsaw, Sarah faced her toughest audience yet. At a town hall, a group of city drivers stood up and confronted her directly. "Do you know what it feels like to be replaced by something that doesn't eat, doesn't sleep, doesn't care?" one man asked. His words hung in the air like smoke. Sarah stepped forward and said, "I don't know what that feels like. But I do know what it feels like to build something you love. And watch people fear it. The Robovan isn't here to erase your work. It's here to evolve it. We still need mechanics, safety stewards, route designers, fleet managers, community voices. If you'll help us, we'll hire local, train local, build local. But we have to do it together." She meant it. And over the next month, Tesla did just that. They opened a Robovan training center in Warsaw. The first class of technician trainees included 80% former city drivers. The narrative shifted. Again, Sarah saw how fear transformed when you invited people to co-create instead of just comply. Back in Palo Alto, the headquarters was evolving, too. A new wing of the AI lab was dedicated entirely to cultural intelligence, systems designed to teach Robovans not just routes or patterns, but social cues, language rhythms, even neighborhood-specific behaviors. Sarah brought in global fellows, young thinkers from all over the world, to share how their communities moved, paused, gathered, and trusted. One girl from Lagos explained how informal signals, hand waves, eye contact, governed traffic more than lights. A young man from Istanbul described how grandmothers had unwritten rules of sidewalk priority. These weren't edge cases. They were essential design truths. The Robovan needed to see the world the way real people did, in all its complexity. Meanwhile, Sarah's own life felt like it was in constant motion. Interviews, briefings, travel. Her days were long, often beginning before sunrise and ending deep into the night. Yet she still carved out space for stillness. Long walks, quiet dinners, and on Sundays, calls with Maya, who'd recently moved to Austin for a new job. One night, Maya asked, "Do you ever think about what you've lost in all of this?" Sarah paused. "You mean like sleep?" "No," Maya said, smiling. "I mean, yourself. Your center. You've been running so fast, carrying so much. I wonder if there's any part of you that misses, being just Sarah. Not the symbol. Not the leader. Just, you." Sarah looked out her window. Below, the Robovan test fleet moved silently through the company lot, glowing like stars in formation. "I miss cooking," she said softly. "Real food. Taking time. Not eating out of containers." "Then cook," Maya said. "Even once a week. You deserve to come home to yourself." That night, Sarah went home early. She stopped by the grocery store. Bought fresh herbs, vegetables, a bottle of wine. She cooked. Slowly. Methodically. With music playing and her phone off. And for 2 hours, she wasn't a leader. She wasn't a genius. She wasn't a name in headlines. She was just a woman in her apartment, barefoot, stirring soup, finding her center again. It didn't fix everything. But it reminded her why she cared. In the weeks that followed, Tesla announced the Global Robovan Citizenship Program, a new initiative aimed at integrating community leaders into the rollout process. These weren't just figureheads. They were co-decision makers, empowered with veto rights over local deployments. The idea was revolutionary in tech: give away power in order to build more of it. Critics called it inefficient, idealistic, naive. But Sarah didn't flinch. She knew that speed without consent was not progress, it was conquest. And the Robovan wasn't built to conquer. It was built to belong. In Berlin, an elderly woman named Anya sent Sarah a handwritten letter. "Your van picked me up on the coldest day of the year," it read. It knew my favorite route. It played Bach. And when I arrived at my doctor's office, I realized something I hadn't felt in years: dignity. "Thank you for giving that back to me." Sarah read the letter twice. Then framed it. Hung it in the hallway of Tesla's human-centered design lab. Above it, she mounted a plaque that read, "Innovation is only as meaningful as the lives it touches." That became her team's mantra. They printed it on their notebooks. Wrote it on whiteboards. Repeated it during launches. And slowly, city by city, continent by continent, the Robovan kept moving. Not perfectly. Not without bumps. But with purpose. Always with purpose. And behind it all, Sarah kept listening. Kept adjusting. Kept dreaming of what it could become. Because the future wasn't just arriving, it was asking to be invited in. And now, the world was learning how to say yes. The announcement came on a Monday morning and hit like a shockwave: Tesla Robovan had been nominated for the World Humanitarian Innovation Award. For most of the world, it was just a headline, one of 100 daily tech stories, but inside Tesla, the air changed. This wasn't just a milestone for the product. This was recognition that what they were doing mattered beyond mobility. It was a sign that they weren't just building machines, they were building meaning. Sarah stared at the email for a long time before speaking. "Who submitted the nomination?" she asked. Her assistant replied, "It came from the UN-affiliated Coalition on Equitable Transport. Looks like they cited deployments in Warsaw, Nairobi, and Sao Paulo." Sarah blinked. "We haven't even launched fully in Sao Paulo." "No," the assistant said, "but your team funded a joint initiative with a local NGO. They used 2 test Robovans for transporting medicine during the floods. Saved over 300 people from missing care." That hit her. Not because it was unexpected, but because she hadn't even known the full story. Somewhere along the way, the Robovan had stopped being a centralized product and started becoming a distributed hope engine, one that moved people, yes, but also resources, dignity, trust. Sarah walked into the main floor of Tesla Mobility that afternoon and called a full team huddle. Engineers, designers, interns, data scientists, they all gathered, curious. "I don't usually do speeches," she began. "But today, I want to say something simple. We didn't ask for this nomination. We didn't aim for it. We aimed for people. We aimed to solve things that others called too small, too hard, or too local. And now the world has noticed, not just because of what we built, but how we built it. Together. With care." She paused. "This award isn't the goal. The goal is still out there, on every street we haven't reached. But today, just for a moment, I want you to know you're seen. And you've earned it." Applause broke out. Not the performative kind, but the kind that builds from the chest and rises into something joyful. That night, Elon sent her a brief but telling message: "You're turning this into something bigger than I imagined." I like being surprised. As the award ceremony loomed, Tesla's global presence accelerated. Robovans were now active in 32 countries, including pilot programs in refugee camps in Jordan and maternal health transport in Kenya. Sarah herself had visited several of these sites, quietly, without press, walking the dusty roads, listening to aid workers and families, watching how the Robovans navigated chaos with quiet precision. She'd sat in one next to a woman in labor being rushed to a clinic outside Amman. The woman gripped Sarah's hand the whole way. Said nothing. But when they arrived safely, she looked Sarah in the eyes and whispered, "Shukran." "Thank you." The moment stayed with her. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was intimate. That, she thought, was the real revolution. Giving people a way forward, even if that forward was just 5 safe miles. The night of the award gala in Geneva arrived like something out of a dream. Celebrities, world leaders, and tech titans gathered beneath crystal chandeliers. The Robovan was now a talking point among politicians and poets alike. Some called it the future of urban design. Others called it the end of the personal car. And some, a growing, louder some, called it a symbol of what innovation should look like when guided by humanity. Sarah wore a dark green gown, elegant but simple. No entourage. No stylist. Just her. As she walked the carpet toward the hall, reporters shouted questions. Do you think the Robovan will change global infrastructure? Is Tesla the new face of humanitarian tech? How do you feel about becoming the moral voice of AI? She didn't answer. She smiled, nodded, and kept walking. Inside the hall, the ceremony unfolded with pomp and precision. The World Humanitarian Innovation Award was the final category of the night. The nominees included projects addressing clean water access, medical drone delivery systems, and agricultural tech for drought zones. Then, the announcer said, and the 2025 Award for Humanitarian Innovation goes to Tesla Robovan. The applause that followed was thunderous. But Sarah felt still. Not numb, just calm, like she'd already accepted the weight of it. She stepped onto the stage, took the crystal trophy, and stood at the podium. Cameras flashed. The room went quiet. Thank you, she began. But tonight isn't about technology. It's about movement. Not just of machines, but of values. Of dignity. Of inclusion. The Robovan didn't win this award. The people who wrote it, trusted it, built it with us, they did. She looked out into the crowd. In a time when the world often feels like it's spinning apart, maybe the most radical thing we can do is help each other move forward. Safely. Quietly. Together. A standing ovation followed. And in that room of power and politics, Sarah stood alone, more than a symbol, less than a saint, just someone who had decided long ago to listen when others talked about fear, and to design when others walked away. After the ceremony, Elon met her in a side room. He was dressed simply, hands in his pockets, looking slightly amused. Didn't think we'd get invited to a Peace Prize gala, he said. Didn't think we'd win it, she replied. We didn't, he said. You did. I built the engine. You gave it a heart. She smiled, unsure how to respond. He didn't wait. So what now, Miss Humanitarian? She laughed. We get back to work. And they did. But something shifted after that night. Governments reached out faster. Cities offered grants, not just contracts. Universities asked to study the Robovan's impact on mental health and social cohesion. And perhaps most unexpectedly, other companies began changing. Not copying Tesla's tech, but its ethic. Mobility startups began adding community boards. Rideshare apps began offering dignity features, preferred music, scent-free zones, safety check-ins. The wave was spreading. Then came the invitation that changed everything. A letter from the White House. The president was convening a national task force on the future of equitable transit. And Sarah had been asked to co-chair it. She read the letter twice before calling Maya. It's happening, she said. I think we're about to change the system from the inside. You already are, Maya said. But now the system's noticing. The task force would oversee infrastructure planning, ethics, rural transit equity, and federal funding for community-based solutions. Sarah saw it as the final frontier, policy. Not just deploying the Robovan, but ensuring that its values could take root in places where code couldn't reach. At the first task force meeting in D.C., she stood in front of a dozen policymakers, engineers, and urban planners and said, "Technology without policy is a prototype. Policy without empathy is a dead document. Let's build something that breathes." And she meant it. She worked nights. Rewrote proposals. Argued fiercely when needed, and yielded when it served the greater good. Slowly, regulations began to shift. Grants were issued not just based on cost efficiency, but on community benefit. Cities were scored not on speed of deployment, but on inclusion metrics. The Robovan wasn't just a product anymore. It had become a principle. And Sarah? She wasn't just an innovator. She was a steward of a new social contract. That fall, in a quiet ceremony at Stanford, she received an honorary doctorate in humane technology. As she gave a brief speech to the graduating class, she said, "When I was your age, I thought intelligence was about how much you knew. But now I understand, it's about how much you're willing to learn. Over and over. From the world. From others. From failure. The Robovan taught me that. And I hope something you build someday teaches you, too." The students cheered. But Sarah didn't feel like a celebrity. She felt like a bridge. And maybe that was the best role of all, not the star, not the savior, but the steady hand that helped carry us all across. The morning after the honorary doctorate ceremony, Sarah sat in her small kitchen, barefoot and bleary-eyed, sipping coffee and scrolling through community feedback from Robovan hubs around the world. This had become her daily ritual, not headlines or investor reports, but real people's words. One woman in Sao Paulo wrote, "I named the Robovan that picks me up Estrella. It feels like it waits for me, not just drives." A teenager in Mumbai shared a video of him surprising his grandmother with her first-ever autonomous ride. The van gently lowered its ramp, and she burst into tears. She said she never thought the future would be for her, the boy wrote. That sentence stayed with Sarah. The future has to be for everyone, or it's not the future. Later that day, she met with the core team at Tesla Mobility. They were developing the next iteration of the Robovan, codenamed Nova. It wasn't just an upgrade. It was a reinvention. Nova would be designed for deep rural access, able to traverse rougher terrain, operate off-grid for up to 72 hours, and run entirely on renewables. It would be part van, part hub, equipped to deliver not only passengers, but mobile services, medicine, education, crisis response. A van that could become a school for a day, a clinic for a night, a shelter in a storm. The idea was bold, maybe even impossible. But that had never stopped Sarah before. "Think of it like a transformer," she told the engineers. "Only instead of weapons, it has Wi-Fi, solar panels, and fresh water." The team lit up. They loved challenges. Loved breaking what existed to build what was needed. Elon, for once, didn't push back. He simply nodded and said, "We'll need new materials. Maybe adaptive skins. Heat-reflective tech. Let's make it something Mars would envy." Sarah grinned. "Let's make sure Earth can use it first." As Nova's concept design came together, Sarah decided it was time to leave California again. This time to see where Nova would matter most. She planned a trip through parts of Africa, starting in Ethiopia and ending in Senegal. The goal was simple: listen before building. She visited remote villages, townships, mobile health units. In a hillside town outside Addis Ababa, she met a young woman named Elam who ran an unofficial tutoring center for neighborhood kids. "We have no transport," Elam explained. "So if kids can't walk here, they don't learn. If they can't walk to the clinic, they don't get treated." She pointed to a rough trail that snaked down a valley. "One van here," she said, "could change generations." Sarah nodded slowly. "Then we'll build one that can climb that hill." She kept her promise. Back in Palo Alto, she pushed for radical changes to the Robovan chassis. Airless tires. Lightweight, impact-resistant frames. Modular interiors that could convert seating into examination tables or classroom desks. Nova would not be sleek. It would not be flashy. But it would be the most purpose-built machine Tesla had ever designed. And then, just as momentum built like a wave, the unexpected happened. A whistleblower inside Tesla Mobility leaked a cache of internal documents to a major news outlet. The headline hit hard: Tesla Robovan, innovation at the expense of oversight. The report claimed that some of the early data aggregation protocols for route prediction had skirted ethical boundaries. That in the earliest deployments, several riders' behavioral data was logged without adequate consent. The story spread fast. Critics pounced. Lawmakers demanded inquiries. Sarah felt it like a body blow. Not because the core of the story was true, but because there had been a time when corners were cut in a rush to scale. Not on her watch, but under her roof. She called an emergency all-hands meeting. Stood in front of her team, eyes steady, voice unwavering. "We will not run from this," she said. "Transparency is not optional. We'll cooperate with investigators, revise protocols, notify every city partner, and publish our internal audits in full." "What if they shut us down?" someone asked. "Then we'll have shut down with integrity," she replied. "But we won't. Because we'll show the world we are who we say we are." She went public. Held a press conference. Took every question. Apologized where it was due. Explained without spinning. She even invited an independent ethics panel to embed within Tesla Mobility. "No closed doors," she told them. "Your job is to keep us honest. Even when it hurts." The storm raged for weeks. Stock dipped. Media spun. But slowly, something remarkable happened. The very communities Tesla had served began speaking up. Testimonials flooded in. A video surfaced of a Robovan delivering medical aid during a flood. A mayor in Poland released a statement: "We will not abandon the tool that saved lives because of a mistake it no longer makes." An op-ed in a Kenyan paper read, "The Robovan didn't fail us. It learned. That's what we must do, too." One night, Sarah sat alone in her office, exhausted. Elon walked in, holding 2 cups of tea. "Thought you might need something warm," he said. She took the cup. "They almost pulled our contracts in Jakarta." "But they didn't," he said. "Because you told the truth. That's rarer than perfection." She looked at him. "Did you know about the data issues back then?" He nodded, "Just once. Not in detail. But I should've. That's on me." She took a sip. "We build trust slowly. And lose it quickly. Then we just have to build it again. And again. Until it's stronger than the fear." And that became her new mantra. Stronger than the fear. In the months that followed, Tesla Mobility became the most transparent division in the company's history. They published every software update log, every user data policy revision, and every community feedback report. It wasn't just PR. It was penance. And it worked. Trust returned, not overnight, but brick by brick. Nova launched its first test fleet in northern Ethiopia, along the very hill Elon had pointed to. Sarah flew there to see it herself. The first Robovan Nova, codenamed Starling, climbed the incline without hesitation. Kids ran beside it, laughing. And when it stopped at the village, Elon opened the door with tears in her eyes. "You kept your word," she said. Sarah nodded. "So did you." That night, they held a small gathering. No cameras. No headlines. Just music, stars, and a sense that something had shifted. Not just for Tesla, but for how the world might move forward, one van, one person, one promise at a time. The invitation came from the World Economic Forum, a special keynote in Davos, Switzerland, asking Sarah to speak not about the Robovan's tech specs, but about its social philosophy. It was a rare honor. These weren't rooms that opened to outsiders easily, especially not engineers. But Sarah wasn't just an engineer anymore. She was a storyteller of the future, one that blended code with compassion, utility with dignity. The speech was scheduled for the final morning of the summit, a spot typically reserved for provocateurs and visionaries. And Sarah, for all her humility, knew that what she said would echo far beyond that stage. As the day approached, she reflected deeply. What was it, really, that made the Robovan more than a machine? Why had it moved people in ways that fleets of buses or taxis never could? Why did elderly women name it, and children chase after it, and cities rally behind it even when headlines faltered? She found the answer not in her office or in meetings, but in a quiet moment at a shelter outside Denver, where a Robovan had been operating as a mobile mental health unit. She watched a counselor open the side doors, welcoming in a veteran with shaking hands. Inside, soft light, calm voices, and an AI interface tuned for trauma sensitivity awaited him. As the van drove off, the man whispered to the counselor, "This is the first place I've felt safe in years." That was it. Safety, not just physical, but emotional, psychological. The Robovan wasn't just transport. It was sanctuary. That became the spine of her speech. In Davos, she stood before a sea of executives, presidents, and analysts and began not with a statistic, but a question. What does it mean to arrive, if the journey steals your dignity? She paused. For too long, mobility has been designed around efficiency. Around speed. Around scale. But not around care. The Robovan began as a machine. Today, it is a promise, one that says no matter who you are, you deserve to move through the world with safety and respect. She told stories, of the child who slept better knowing the van would take him to dialysis on time, of the refugee mother who said the van made her feel visible again. She challenged the room, what if we designed everything, not just tech, but policy, business, systems, with dignity as the baseline? Not as the reward, but the starting point. When she finished, the room was silent. Then applause swelled, not in the performative way of conferences, but in that rare, honest way when people remember their own humanity. Afterward, a former prime minister approached her. "That was the most disruptive talk I've heard," he said. "Because it didn't threaten our power. It questioned our purpose." Back in Palo Alto, Nova entered Phase 2 of deployment. Tesla had partnered with Medicines Sans Frontieres, outfitting Nova units as mobile vaccination centers in areas where supply chains collapsed. Another wave was being prototyped as emergency shelters, equipped with fold-out beds, solar cooking units, and mesh networks for internet access even during disasters. They called this version the Solace Van. It was a strange thing, how the Robovan had begun as a sleek urban solution and was now becoming a multi-role vessel for resilience. Sarah oversaw every variant personally. She insisted on testing them in the field, not just in labs. In Haiti, after an earthquake, she slept inside a Solace van overnight to understand its limits. In rural Alaska, she tested the insulation during a blizzard. Each time, she came back with notes, more than the engineers wanted, sometimes, but always grounded in reality. If we don't live inside what we build, she told them, we'll never understand its consequences. Her leadership style became case study material at business schools. Not because it was perfect, but because it was different. She didn't chase market share. She chased usefulness. And oddly, that made the Robovan a commercial success in ways no one had predicted. Cities began adopting it not just as a transport layer, but as a civic infrastructure tool. A new term entered the policy lexicon, mobility as dignity. Grants were rewritten to include it. Design standards began referencing it. Competing automakers began adding comfort equity metrics to their rollout plans. Meanwhile, Back at Tesla HQ, a quiet internal movement had begun. Several employees proposed opening source code for parts of the Robovan AI, especially those related to accessibility. "We've led," they argued. "Now let's lift." It was a radical proposal in a company famous for protecting its IP. Elon was skeptical. "You're proposing we give away our advantage." Sarah disagreed. "No. I'm proposing we give away the parts that change lives. We can't patent empathy." It took months of legal navigation, but eventually, Tesla announced the Robovan Accessibility Protocols, RAP, would be open-sourced globally. Any developer, city, or nonprofit could use them to design interfaces that prioritized low-vision users, multilingual populations, and neurodiverse riders. The response was overwhelming. Universities built on the protocols. Startups in Vietnam and South Africa adapted them for local transport. A blind developer in Argentina used the system to create a voice-only wayfinding tool for city buses. Sarah cried when she saw the demo. "This," she said, "is what it's all for." But even as her influence grew, Sarah began to feel something else, an ache, not of pain, but of distance. She hadn't seen Maya in months. Their Sunday calls had grown shorter, interrupted by schedules and silence. One night, Maya texted, "Do you remember what it feels like to stop? To be still?" Sarah stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. She missed her. Missed them. Missed herself. A week later, she flew to Austin without telling anyone. Knocked on Maya's door at sunset. Maya opened it, eyes wide. "You came," she said. "I didn't know if you still knew how." Sarah smiled, tired. "I'm still learning." They sat on the porch, said nothing for a long time. Then Sarah spoke. "I've been building this world for so many people. But I forgot how to build space for us." Maya reached out. Took her hand. "Then let's build slower. Together." That night, they cooked. Laughed. Cried. And Sarah, for the first time in a long time, didn't feel like she was leading anything. She just felt home. In the following weeks, Sarah announced she would be stepping back from day-to-day operations. Not quitting, but rebalancing. She appointed 2 co-directors to lead Tesla Mobility, one from engineering, one from community relations. Her final memo to the company read, "The goal was never to run the world. The goal was to help it move better. And now, you know how." The Robovan continued. The mission expanded. But Sarah, quietly, returned to what she loved most, designing, listening, being present. Sometimes she still visited launch sites. Rode in the back of the van. Watched people. Watched how they relaxed when the doors opened. Watched how they trusted the quiet. One day, a child climbed into a Robovan and looked up at her. "Is this a magic car?" he asked. Sarah smiled. "No. But it's made by people who believe you matter." He nodded, content. And as the van pulled away, Sarah watched the future roll on, not with noise or conquest, but with care. It started with a phone call from a place she'd never heard of, Fairmont, Nebraska. A small town with barely 3,000 residents, a grain elevator, 2 churches, and 1 failing community hospital. The mayor, a woman named Edith Rowley, sounded nervous but determined. "We don't have the budget for a Robovan," she said. "But we've got an idea. And a town full of people who need one." Sarah had stepped away from operations, yes. But she never stopped listening. And something about Edith's voice, practical, grounded, laced with stubborn hope, made her pause. "Go on," Sarah said. Edith explained, their local hospital had lost its overnight emergency staff. The nearest ER was now over 40 miles away. Several elderly residents had stopped attending checkups altogether. A high schooler with epilepsy had suffered a seizure and nearly died waiting for a ride. "We don't need a fleet," Edith said. "We need one Robovan. Just one. Parked in our lot, ready when it's needed. It could save lives. It could change this town." Sarah didn't hesitate. "I'll come see for myself." 3 days later, she was in Fairmont. The town was quiet, dusted with snow. No media, no speeches. Just Sarah in a coat and boots, walking down Main Street, shaking hands, sitting in pews, listening to stories. She met a retired farmer who'd lost his wife because the ambulance came too late. A single mom who drove her diabetic daughter 90 minutes each way for insulin checks. A local doctor who said, "If you bring a Robovan here, I'll volunteer every weekend." By the time Sarah left, the decision was made. Not just to deploy a unit, but to create something new, the Rural Relay Program. A pilot initiative that would place one Robovan in every county under 10,000 residents that had lost a hospital in the past 10 years. It would be staffed by rotating medical volunteers, run partly on solar power, and managed through a digital queue that could be accessed by anyone, no smartphone required. Back in Palo Alto, the announcement sent shockwaves. Investors were cautious. "It's not scalable," some said. "It won't generate revenue." But Sarah's voice was clear. "If we can build rockets for Mars, we can build safety for Fairmont. This isn't charity. It's civilization." Elon didn't argue. He just smirked. "You've got that look again." "Which one?" "The one where I know I can't stop you." She grinned. "Good." The Rural Relay Program launched with 10 units. Each one was named after a different virtue: grace, mercy, justice, hope. Sarah insisted on it. "Let them know what's arriving when it pulls up." Each van was equipped with medical supplies, broadband hotspots, temperature control systems for pharmaceuticals, and a discrete AI interface trained to detect signs of distress, pain, or trauma through vocal tone and microexpressions. But more importantly, each van came with a promise: no one would be turned away, and no one would pay. Funding came from a unique model, a blend of philanthropic microbonds, local fundraising, and Tesla's own community dividend program. Fairmont was the first to receive one. Edith Rowley was waiting with a crowd of school kids when the Robovan rolled up. "This," she said, "is the most important machine we've ever parked in our town." Sarah stayed for the first week. Watched as the van served over 200 residents. Saw it bring a mother in labor to a clinic in time. Saw it deliver oxygen to a man with long COVID. Saw it become, almost instantly, not a novelty, but a neighbor. The program expanded. 20 vans. Then 50. By the end of the year, there were Robovans in remote parts of Idaho, Appalachia, tribal lands in Arizona, and flood-ravaged towns in Mississippi. Each one quietly doing its job. No press releases. Just presence. And then, the real shift happened. Other companies began asking, "How do we participate?" Not just copy, but contribute. A logistics startup offered free cold storage tech. A retired bus manufacturer donated components. A university designed a sensor that could detect domestic abuse indicators during transport and send silent alerts to local shelters. The Robovan had become a platform. Not just for movement, but for care innovation. Sarah knew what that meant: it was time to federate. She proposed the creation of a global mobility commons, a digital and legal framework that allowed vetted organizations to build on Robovan designs under a shared ethical charter. Any nation, nonprofit, or city could join, as long as they upheld the dignity-first principles. Elon was intrigued. "So now you're building a republic of vans." "Not just vans," she said. "Values." The Mobility Commons launched quietly but spread fast. Seoul joined. Then Reykjavik. Then a grassroots NGO in Bolivia. Within a year, over 60 regions were participating, building locally, sharing improvements, evolving together. Sarah became something unexpected, a quiet architect of a new infrastructure movement. Not centralized. Not profit-led. But collaborative, bottom-up, and global. Meanwhile, her personal life found a new rhythm. Maya joined the Rural Relay Advisory Board, traveling with Sarah to remote outposts, co-designing feedback loops, organizing local listening circles. They joked that their relationship was now sponsored by an electric van. One night, after visiting a reservation in Montana, they sat under the stars, wrapped in a blanket, and watched a Robovan recharge silently in the distance. Maya whispered, "Do you think this is what peace looks like?" Sarah smiled. "I think it's what it sounds like. Quiet. Steady. Present." But with success came new pressure. A multinational conglomerate launched a rival vehicle, sleek, fast, automated, but with ad-saturated interiors and exclusive tiers. They undercut Tesla's contracts, lured away developers, and flooded the market. "They're hijacking your idea," Elon warned. "No," Sarah replied. "They're showing us what happens when you build without soul. Let them. We'll outlast them." She doubled down on transparency. Published their blueprints. Invited public audits. Opened town halls. And the public responded. Communities rejected the advans. Riders demanded Robovans. "Give us the one that listens," a protest sign read in Detroit. In time, the competitor pivoted to commercial freight. The Robovan, meanwhile, kept rolling. 10,000 units. Then 20. Not because they chased users, but because they served them. Sarah knew the journey was far from over. There were still deserts of neglect, corridors of silence, places where people were forgotten. But she also knew something else: the path forward didn't require speed. It required staying. Listening. Building one stop at a time. One night, she received a letter from a girl in Fairmont. It read, "Dear Ms. Sarah, thank you for bringing the van. My grandma got better. I want to build vans too one day. Or maybe be a doctor inside one." Sarah held the letter close. And in that moment, she understood, the Robovan wasn't just delivering people. It was delivering dreams. And those dreams, once planted, would drive the future farther than any motor ever could. When the call came from the United Nations, Sarah was standing on a small airstrip in Kenya, watching a Nova Series Robovan reverse its seats into a makeshift exam table for a child who had fallen ill during a drought-related migration. She was tired, her hair pulled back loosely, red dust on her boots, but her mind was clear. The van, in that moment, was doing everything she had designed it to do: adapting, responding, protecting. The UN request was simple but historic: would Sarah lead a newly formed task force to develop a blueprint for resilient, equitable transportation infrastructure across disaster-prone regions globally? It would be a multi-nation effort, funded not just by governments, but by private-public partnerships, NGOs, and research institutions. The Robovan, it turned out, had become not just a technological marvel, but a case study in what was possible when innovation met empathy. Sarah paused. It wasn't just another project. It was a pivot, a chance to shift from proving the Robovan worked to reimagining how the entire world moved. But it also meant more time away from home. More decisions. More weight. That evening, she called Maya from the camp. The signal was weak, but the connection strong. "They asked me to lead it," she said. "The whole thing. Global resilience mobility. Will you?" Maya asked gently. "Only if you're beside me. I can't keep building futures if I lose the one we're living now." There was a pause, then a soft laugh. "Then we'll go together. But let's take the scenic route this time." Sarah accepted the role. The task force was officially launched at the Geneva Mobility Forum under the name Pathways Initiative. Its mission, to connect the unconnected, to create frameworks for modular transport systems that could adapt in times of peace or peril, and to guarantee that no human would be stranded because of poverty, geography, or circumstance. Her first move shocked many. She insisted on beginning the project in places where infrastructure had already failed, war zones, floodplains, earthquake-ravaged cities. "Don't show me a system that works in Paris," she said. "Show me one that survives Port-au-Prince." The Robovan quickly became the foundation. But Sarah didn't treat it as the only solution. She opened the platform to competitors, thinkers, local engineers. In Bangladesh, she worked with tuk-tuk manufacturers to create micromobility pods based on Robovan battery systems. In the Arctic Circle, she collaborated with indigenous communities to design snow-adapted modules that could function as mobile community centers. Her philosophy was clear: don't export, adapt. Don't dominate, co-create. At every summit, she reminded leaders that mobility wasn't about roads and vehicles, it was about trust. "If a person steps into a vehicle you've designed," she said in one keynote, "they're not just trusting its mechanics. They're trusting that you saw them. That you built it with their needs, their fears, their hopes in mind." But not everyone agreed. A growing block of technocratic critics pushed back, claiming the Robovan model was emotionally indulgent and economically unsustainable at scale. One report dubbed it a charity disguised as innovation. Sarah responded by publishing a comprehensive impact report, 1,200 pages of data, testimonies, fiscal metrics, and academic studies. The results were undeniable. Communities with Robovan access saw a 22% increase in preventative health visits, a 31% reduction in school absences, and a measurable rise in civic trust. "Call it what you want," she wrote in a response op-ed, "if compassion works, scale it." Elon publicly supported her. At Tesla's annual shareholders meeting, he addressed the criticism directly. The Robovan wasn't built to impress investors. It was built to make humanity proud. And it has. Internally, Tesla Mobility reached a new milestone, 100,000 active Robovans in 43 countries. But Sarah never let the number become the story. To her, the real story was a boy in Peru who now made it to speech therapy. A grandmother in Missouri who didn't have to miss her dialysis. A midwife in Ghana who delivered twins by headlamp in the back of a Robovan and named them Hope and Tesla. Meanwhile, Maya had started a foundation focused on local Robovan integration training, ensuring that in every place a unit was deployed, people from that community were equipped to maintain, adapt, and lead its use. She believed, like Sarah, that real progress was shared progress. One afternoon, Sarah visited a university in Delhi that had built its own variant of the Robovan, completely solar-powered, bamboo-structured, designed for narrow urban alleys. The students called it the Shravan, after the mythological character who carried his aging parents on his shoulders. "It's not a Tesla," the lead student said, embarrassed. Sarah smiled. "It doesn't have to be. It's yours. That's what matters." The model was beautiful, functional, and alive with local meaning. It was exactly what she'd hoped would happen. And then came the storm. Not metaphorical, a real one. A Category 5 cyclone struck the Philippines with almost no warning. Roads washed out. Power grids collapsed. Entire regions went dark. Sarah and Maya were in Jakarta at the time, meeting with Southeast Asian stakeholders. Within hours, they diverted to Manila and coordinated a Robovan rapid deployment fleet with the local government. 27 units arrived via military cargo plane. It was the first test of the Robovan as emergency shelter, triage unit, and comms hub under extreme conditions. They performed flawlessly. One unit rescued over 120 people from a submerged village. Another became a temporary birthing center for 4 days. A viral photo showed a nurse cradling a newborn in the back of a Robovan, under lantern light, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and awe. The image spread across the globe. The world was watching, not the power of Tesla, but the power of a promise kept. In the aftermath, several nations passed new legislation that enshrined access to emergency mobile infrastructure as a human right. Mobility is no longer a luxury, one prime minister said. It is survival. Sarah stood on the tarmac after the final Robovan returned from the field, mud-splattered and dented but running. She walked up to it, placed her hand on the side, and whispered, "You did good." That night, she and Maya sat on the roof of their hotel, looking out at a city slowly returning to light. "Do you think we've done enough?" Maya asked. Sarah thought for a long time. "Enough for now. But there's always another road." Maya smiled. "Then let's keep driving. But maybe slower." Sarah nodded. "Slower sounds good." In her journal that night, Sarah wrote one sentence: "We didn't just build a vehicle. We built a way forward." And that, she realized, was what the Robovan had always been, not a product, not a project, but a pathway. One paved with empathy, engineered with care, and driven by the belief that no one should ever be left behind. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?